Yo, what's up guys? This is Slow-Mo Backslap, and today we're going to talk about a pretty polarizing game being talked about in the gaming industry, in the gaming community right now, and that game is The Last of Us Part 2. The Last of Us Part 2 came out in June, published by Sony, published by PlayStation Studios, developed by Naughty Dog, a first-party developer of Sony PlayStation, and I needed a couple of days to really gather my thoughts about this game, a couple of days to really run through my mind everything that happened in the game as far as the story, the narrative, the gameplay, the sound design, all the game mechanics, just really run it all through my brain one more time before I really deliver my thoughts on how I felt about the game. So bear with me and let's just get into it. But before we get into it, hit the like and subscribe button. I really appreciate that. Really helps me out with that YouTube algorithm and all that stuff. So yeah, let's do it. And before I go any further, let me just say straight up, like right now, this will be a spoiler video. I don't know how you could do a impressions, review, / introspective, whatever kind of video on this game without containing some kind of spoilers. It is what it is. If you haven't played it yet, I highly recommend that you do to experience this game. And then for those who have already played it and experienced it, here we go. So The Last of Us Part 2 is a sequel to, of course, The Last of Us, the first game, The Last of Us. And this takes place 4 years after the events of the first game. And to kind of give you some context of those events, the world is post-apocalypse, essentially. There has been a virus that's kind of fungal. This virus has devastated the world. There are people who are infected, and when you become infected, you go kind of crazy and you start attacking people, eating people, and the longer you are infected, the worse off it becomes. You start growing mushrooms out of your head, your whole body changes. You can grow into walls. You can even longer, you turn into other things. It's really nasty and disgusting. I always found it. It just makes my skin crawl just looking at them. But the clickers, as they call them in this game, are designed perfectly. They're designed perfectly because they're designed to make you feel icky, disgusted just looking at them. And it is what it is. It delivers on what the game designers wanted you to feel when you look and deal with them. But to go on, turns out there's one person who is immune to the virus, and that's Ellie. And in the first game, Joel is tasked with delivering Ellie to a group of people that could deliver a vaccine and potentially save humanity. He does accomplish his goal of getting her to the Fireflies, but then he finds out that the process of getting the vaccine from her would kill her. Now, a little bit further backstory on Joel. Joel is the main protagonist of the first game, and I wouldn't even really call him a protagonist because he's not really a good guy. He's the main character of the first game. He's done a lot of bad things. He is a broken man who lost his daughter, who is around the same age as Ellie at this time, and he really didn't have anything to live for. And getting to know her and bonding with her in his travels from Boston all the way to Seattle in the first game, he started to change in how he viewed her and how he viewed their relationship. She became, in the beginning, she was a burden, but by the end, he started to view her in many ways the way he viewed his daughter. And for Joel, he just could not lose another daughter. And so Joel slaughtered everyone that was in his way in that hospital and got Ellie out. And that is where this story kind of really picks up. That's the root of the story. The story is about what Joel has done to humanity, to some of the individual characters in the game, whether it be Ellie, whether it be a new introduced character, Abby, or just really all of humanity, and the consequences of those actions. And so that's just really just the overall plot of this game. I'm gonna get back to the story in a little bit. Let me talk about some of the other aspects of this game that deserve to be highlighted. What Naughty Dog did with this game's gameplay is not overhaul it. It didn't just need an overhaul. It was not especially unique or different than anything else they had done with, say, the Uncharted series. But what they've done with this gameplay is take everything that it was and improve upon it to bring it to a different level. The melee combat in this game is, on a technical level, proficient, but when you add the proficiency of the melee combat, and then you add in the master level achievement with animations, it just takes it to a whole nother level. It looks like a cinematic in-game cutscene, but it's not. It's actual gameplay. The free-flowing ability to go in a kill zone area, essentially. Let it be a room that you're locked in with a bunch of clickers, or a small open area where you're solo or just with one other AI character that isn't going to do much for you, going up against enemies that are armed to the teeth and hunting you down. The ability to switch from throwing Molotovs at enemies when they're bunched together to silently assassinating enemies as they get close to you, or that you have isolated to be easily dispatched without alerting the others, to just going full bore if you have the ammo to do it, to just get it started, start headshotting people and just go all out and defend your position, or start rushing people when you have the opportunity to do so. Your ability to dispatch these enemies is all up to you and your proficiency in the combat, and I have to say that's well done, extremely well done. It was very satisfying to get into these firefights in this game. And when I compare it to the previous game, when I played the previous game, I was so enamored with the story, but so turned off by the combat that I just dealt with the combat to get to the next cutscene, to get to the next portion of the story that I was really more interested in. In this game, it was almost the opposite. I really wanted to get back to fighting. And so they definitely delivered on improving the quality of the combat. Now, there's something else that Naughty Dog did that made the combat so tension building, so hair raising, is the sound design. The sound design in this game, not just for the combat, but in all aspects, is the best I've ever seen in any game, period. I'm talking about complete silence at the best moments when you are just dropping down into a new area that's pitch black. The tension that creates and not knowing what's going to happen in the next moment. It's perfect. When the bass hits with those throbbing heartbeat sounds, when you are trying to remain silent as you're trying to silently dispatch infected and not alert them, it keeps ramping that tension up. If you do alert them and then it starts to really hit at a higher tempo, it's perfect. It's perfect in combat. The guitar playing in moments where very emotional moments for characters, big reveals, plot turns. It is perfect in all the right situations. It's so good that it allows the characters and the awesome animation, which I'll get to in a moment, to just really allow you to understand what the character is thinking about without actually having that to be said. Just overall, the best sound design I've ever seen in a game, and very fitting music to the theme of the story. And so let's get into what has been a point of contention for many gamers, and that point of contention has been the narrative, the story. And going into it, I have to say, I had a bit of a pessimistic view of what the story was going to be based off the leaks that I had seen and heard and read, and based off of the overall general mood of the story. But after playing it, I have to say that I wasn't expecting what I eventually got out of it. Let me talk about the one thing that I enjoyed the most about this game. And it's not something that wasn't in The Last of Us 1, but some of these stories that you read about in the game, these stories from characters that you didn't even get a chance to meet. You will find a letter, and I found that to end up being some of my most favorite moments in the game, was finding a letter from a character who was surviving in this world, this new world where everything had changed, and seeing their perspective on things, and then finding another letter from that same person speaking on things that had changed going further, and then kind of finding out their fate. A great example of that was the Archer. So this guy, he's an archer. I can't remember his name right now, forgive me. But he's living in Seattle, and he's kind of like a pillar in his neighborhood, his community in Seattle. He's well known. The first thing I found from him was a picture from his daughter of him as like this big clicker slayer. So he was a great archer, and apparently he had been really like protecting the neighborhood from the infected, which was great. I thought that was awesome. As a dad, I would love to have my kids kind of look at me that way. Then you start to find other letters where things aren't going so well with the military occupying Seattle, and then the wolves taking over, and how a lot of the neighbors were looking up to him for advice to understand what was going on. Meanwhile, his daughter is going around using graffiti on all of the signage, telling people what to do and things like that, and so that she ends up getting executed. And he's very angry about what happened, and come to find out later on, you see that he feels betrayed by some of the people in the community, and he writes a letter to someone who had left Seattle before all this happened, and he explains to her what he did to get back at his neighbors who he felt betrayed him, how he tricked them into going into a auto garage that was full of spores, locked the door on him, but one of them, now infected, bit him before he was able to get them all in there. And now that he knows he's infected, he decided to lock himself in his own garage and just wait out his fate. And then not too long after that, you actually fight that clicker with the bow and arrow on his back. And once you defeated him, I really had a moment to just kind of stand there just like, wow, that was that guy. That was his life. And it kind of held some weight with me, taking his bow and arrow off of him and then using that for the rest of the game. That kind of storytelling you don't see too often in games. The narrative is very strong here, even to those very small moments where you're just reading a letter from people who are long past. Now, a big point of contention is Abby. And I have to say, I enjoyed Abby's story. I enjoy Abby as a character. I thought she was very different, very well thought out. I enjoyed her playthrough, the moments where you control her. But here's the big issue with this. And I think probably my biggest point of contention, I have three with this narrative. And my biggest point of contention is the narrative design, the flow of the narrative. You start out with Ellie and then you switch to Abby prior to Joel dying. After Joel's death, you're with Ellie for 3 days. Then you switch to Abby for 3 days. And then post their confrontation in Seattle, you're with Ellie and then Abby and then Ellie again. I feel like for that stretch in Seattle, they really lost a lot of people who did not care about the Abby character that well, and that's going to happen. You're going to have some people, there's some people who like Abby more than Ellie now. There's some people who just don't care about Abby, period. All they cared about was Joel and Ellie. You're going to have those kind of people. What you should be doing, though, is keeping it a balanced narrative. They spent too much time with Abby. They spent too much time with Ellie. You had it set up where each seems like chapter of Seattle was a day. They should have switched back and forth in those days. And then after both, you can play through Ellie's day one and then Abby's day one, then go to Ellie day two. This would have kept people more interested in what was going on, and also would have got people a little bit more invested in some of these supporting characters, because especially considering Abby's group, Abby's friends, you see them all die for the most part except for Manny by the time you finish Ellie's playthrough part of Seattle. So for a lot of people, they kind of view that as, I don't care about Owen, I don't care about Mel, these people are dead. Maybe they would have had a little bit more emotionally invested in the love triangle between Owen, Mel, and Abby if they didn't already know the outcome of that during these cutscenes of this tension between them. I mean, it was very well done, very well acted, but for a lot of people, they're like, I don't care that Mel and Abby have issues right now. Don't care that Owen slept with Abby while he's also still with Mel. These are dead people. My second issue with the narrative is some of these supporting characters really don't have much of a motivation to be doing what they're doing, and this is namely about Jesse. Jesse is a friend of Ellie's, Dina's ex-boyfriend. Doesn't seem too concerned about the fact that Dina broke up with him. And yet, a day after both Tommy leaves, Ellie and Dina leaves, this guy decides to go travel across the country by himself. Now, he said he looked up to Joel, but I mean, I look up to all kinds of people that I know. If they were murdered, I would feel bad about that, but I'm not going to go travel across the country for revenge. Like, he knew what he was getting into. You're traveling across the country to take out a minimum 6 people that were involved in Joel's death, knowing that you're probably going to end up having to kill many more people in order to get that accomplished. That just doesn't seem like something that just a friend would be doing, knowing that you don't have any backup, knowing that you're far from home. And then finally, Joel. Now, Joel is voice acted wonderfully by Troy Baker. Great job. His dialogue's great. It's amazing. But Joel dying, his death is a plot-based death, not a character-based death. And what I mean by that, there's a difference between plot-based storytelling and character-based storytelling. Character-based storytelling means that characters are doing things that are within the scope of their character, and therefore when they do complete actions or make mistakes, it all shows with how that character's personality and makeup is. Plot-based storytelling is that you put characters in positions in certain places to kind of push the narrative along. Now, I have zero problem with Joel dying, because I think, and I always felt, even as soon as they announced this game, that Joel should die. He should be dying. This is the kind of world this is. And it doesn't matter in this world whether you were the main protagonist of the first game. It doesn't matter how beloved a character you are. It's a brutal world. Joel needed to die. But how he died, trusting in someone that you just met, really? Neil Druckmann says that Joel got soft. I'm like, yeah, I understand getting soft, but getting stupid at the same time, those are two different things. And how was he soft when he's not just sitting behind the walls of Jackson, living in his big house and not dealing with the outside world at all. He's going out on patrols on a weekly basis, clearing out clickers and runners, dealing with strangers on a consistent basis. At what point did the world in Wyoming become different than the world in Boston or on the way there? He couldn't afford to get soft. He wouldn't have survived those 4 years prior to these events happening if he really got soft. Why didn't he choose to go to one of his other safe houses on their route instead of going to her hideout, someone that you just met? And really, he should know, only helping you because it was convenient at the time because you were getting attacked by a horde of clickers. Why, after you get there and the horde is dead, do you decide to go in? You have horses, you can leave. Of course, they wouldn't have allowed him to leave because Abby knew he was at that point. But even worse, why, once you realized you saw the energy change in the room, was they heard your name, instead of reacting to try to save yourself, you just asked a really silly question like, oh, you guys act like you know who I am. Really, Joel? Really? That's plot-based storytelling. That's the difference between Game of Thrones seasons 1 through 6 and Game of Thrones seasons 7 through 8. Character-based storytelling in 1 through 6 had everyone hooked. Amazing. Plot-based storytelling, to finish a story out that you didn't write and don't quite understand the motivations of these characters and never did, you get season 7 through 8. It is what it is. And probably one more minor thing, this is extremely minor, I didn't really understand why Abby did not have all the equipment really that she needed. I understand that you switched from Ellie to Abby in Seattle and therefore need to build up stats again, build up the equipment again, but why, if she's living in a stadium and she has a weapons master who gave her all kinds of guns, all the ammo she needed, a truck to drive in, you have enough ammo for a shooting range, really? But you gotta find an additional holster out in some abandoned home and a strap to hold your extra rifles. Like, that's just weird. It's just weird. So yeah, I understand from a gameplay perspective why they did it, but from a narrative perspective, it doesn't make sense. But I think I'm being long-winded here. Overall, The Last of Us Part 2 is a superior game to The Last of Us Part 1 in every way but narrative. Narrative-wise, I feel like the narrative of The Last of Us Part 1 had a better flow, better character motivations, not too many additional supporting characters, but was very well done. I think this game is not really a game of revenge or hate, as Neil Druckmann has said. It's a story of guilt. Guilt is what drove Ellie to have her issues with Joel, because she felt like her role in life was to die to save humanity. And what was the purpose of her being immune if it served no other purpose but just to keep her alive? She felt useless, and there was guilt in that, and she blamed Joel for that. She felt guilt for Joel dying and not being able to save him. That's why she went to Seattle for revenge, because she didn't know how to deal with it. All of Abby's friends felt guilt for what they did to Joel. Not saying that they don't believe that he didn't deserve to die. They still felt like he deserved to die. But how they tortured and killed him, they felt guilt for that. It was guilt, the guilt that Abby felt when Liv called out her name when she was about to kill Dina, and she angry because Ellie had killed Mel, who was pregnant, and said, good, Dina's pregnant too. Liv said, wait a minute now, is this really who you are? And that's why I understand the ending, because Ellie felt guilt about the person that she had became, where she would pull a knife on a dying Liv to force Abby to fight her to the death. It was a guilt trip that Tommy put on Ellie to even convince her to go after Abby once he got the information that he had. It's a game of guilt, not really a game of revenge, but it's a good story. Overall, a good story. And if you haven't played the game yet and you're still listening to me ramble on about it, I think you should definitely check it out. So yeah, that's it. I'm done. Finally. I appreciate you guys still listening, still watching, and let me know what you guys think about this game. Was it a game that you really enjoyed? Did you really feel like it really lived up to expectations? Or do you kind of feel like it did not do that? It didn't do it for you, wasn't it? Let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you liked the video. Hit the dislike button if you didn't. And hit the subscribe button if you want to see more of my content in the future. Peace.